Call to order at 5 o'clock, and the first order of business is recognition of groups and/or individual visitors. As you can see, we have a couple here, Michaela and Mike, who will be participating in a little bit. So does anybody have anything, do you have anything that's not on the agenda you want to talk about? This is a time when people can do that. I didn't think so, but I just have to formally ask that.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to come up with something.
Okay.
Unless I said you just thought of something.
We can talk about my new haircut. How free I am.
Okay, so we'll go to the consent agenda. I learned something yesterday. We have under finances, we have ratification of warrants for May 15th and May 29th. And so I was in signing warrants yesterday because I can't do them. I don't have time to look at them here. And I asked for the May 15th ones. And it turns out that we're always a week ahead with those. And we already signed those. But we're approving them tonight. So could I have a motion to approve the clerk's report, the minutes of May 22nd, and the financial report, warrants of May 15th and May 29th, 2019?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Minutes were good. All in favor? Aye, please.
Aye.
Okay. Committee reports. Deb is not here. And Andy, was there a policy council meeting in the last? The last one was with
Well,
us.
the last one was with all of you. So I don't have anything
So
really to report.
there's nothing additional.
And the diversity committee's meeting next Wednesday.
Okay, and the energy committee is not meeting, the finance committee is meeting May?
They
Just
met, but I was not there, so I don't think there was much on the agenda.
No, we
So,
approved warrants,
payroll.
payroll, yes, absolutely. And I'm required to submit a doctor's something saying that I'm healthy enough to continue the job, so.
Sound, mind, and body.
Yes, just sound body. Mind, I didn't actually check.
There's an event since that last meeting.
Andy does have one comment about the last meeting.
I just wanted to acknowledge that there was a event out at the Scott Farm sponsored by EES. That was a big visioning and feedback event that was beautifully catered by The Porch, and it involved staff, community members, family members served, whose families are being served by early education services, and apparently it's the first time I've been to it. Have any of you on the board ever been to it?
The
It's
World
an annual
Cafe?
event. It's
Yes.
called the World Cafe.
Yeah, I've been to a few.
And it gives you a chance to learn and share. It's something I thought could actually be learned from for another group of schools could have something like this. It's a great way to acknowledge the work that they're doing, the lives that they're changing, the problems that they're facing, and to give everybody that came a chance to speak and address a series of questions and then report back to the full group. And it wasn't a policy council meeting per se, but it was a project of EES. And I think it's a fantastic thing that Deb Gass has going there. That really is a community building and information sharing. And again, it reinforced for me the incredible challenges that our early education programs face, and also, despite those challenges, the amazing work that they're doing in serving families with younger children and getting them ready to enter our school system. So I want to let the notes reflect that World Cafe was a phenomenal event.
Thank you. So we'll move to administrative reports, and we'll start with Mariah, start with the earliest children, and move on up.
Great. I have a short report that's month because everyone's winding down their programs and getting ready for summer programs. Brattleboro Center for Children is having a fundraiser at the Strolling of the Heifers, and Hilltop Montessori School is working on their moving up ceremony, and so the older children create a special beaded bracelet for the younger children, and they create this peace buddy, and then they have a school-wide field day, so that's coming up. And West B has their end of the year celebration tomorrow night And then we have our last Early Educators PLC, so it's a professional learning community run by Janice Stockman and Brandy Levesque. And it's a combination of licensed pre-K teachers, kindergarten teachers, and special educators. And that's all I have to share.
That's not here, so who would like to be next? Okay.
Just realized that instead of stapling each set of two, they grouped themselves. Maybe I'll go next and I'll unstaple while someone else does.
Jerry,
Yeah, I have something, so I'll pass it down. Yeah, I'll retake it.
Oh, great.
Yeah, we have our variety show tonight. And so students start gathering about 5:30, so I don't miss that. So I'll go real quick. So the report's coming around. I'll just highlight a few things. First of all, our Student Leadership Council had a very active May. They were involved in the King Arthur Bake for Good, did a trip to the Groundworks, as well as a visit to Thompson House, all in kind of supporting our Brattleboro town focus on compassion and helping and caring for others. So very busy for student leaderships. We also had 2 students that participated in the NEYT Adventure Theater program. And that is a program that runs year-round, every Wednesday morning, 9 until 11:30, something like that. And so they had their performance May, I think it was 14, 15, 16, someplace around there. They had 3 performances for the community. Our 4th and 5th grade classes went on, I think it's Thursday, I don't know, it's in there someplace, on one of those days to support their 2 peers, to watch their peers participate in that special program. So it's really a great opportunity for the students that we had to participate in that program, and for our students to also be aware of the diversity that's within our community and within our schools, and to see how as diverse and that we are, that there's still things that expectations are not lowered, you know, I mean, the expectations are still real high. So that they performed Jack and Jill and the Beanstalk, and it was a great performance. Our family picnic was this past Friday. We had probably 200 plus people there. It's always, I always tell families that it's our opportunity as a staff to cook and for the families. They give so much to us, and just help to support our school, that we cook and we serve, so that they can just come and kids play in the bouncy house. We have Kona ice truck there, so all students have an opportunity to get a free Kona ice. We had Brooks Memorial Library that was there to do a book swap, so bring a book, get a book. So they pretty much cleaned out their book swap. They offered summer reading lists, and so it was really a wonderful evening, and the weather has always worked out for us. So again, Friday night was a beautiful night. 6th grade night, our 6th grade night is on that Monday, June 17th, is that right?
Yes.
And we're at 5:30. Pre-K celebration is June 14th, it's a Friday, at 1:30 in the afternoon. So if you have a chance, either event, we'd love to see you there. We keep the pre-K celebration kind of quiet. They don't really like a lot of pomp and circumstance, so just invite families to come, and they sing some songs, and they receive a little certificate of completion, and so it's a very sweet ending to their school year. And that's about it. And there's a whole bunch of different upcoming field trips that are happening, upcoming events, different parent events, but you can kind of read through that. So thank you.
Thanks. Sure.
So as those are going around. We, like all three schools, have just finished up, for the most part, SBAC testing, which is nice. Today at Green Street, we held our end of the year transition meetings, data meetings. So each grade level was able to present to next year's grade level their students and their accomplishments and their needs for next year. So it was a really full, great day. And I feel like we are in a really good position to start the school year next year. But it was a really positive day. We had our spring concert last week. Did anyone get a chance to? It was such a full house, I wasn't sure. Did you guys get a chance to check that out?
Couldn't be there, no, I'm sorry.
It's too bad. It was a fantastic night. So we had our regular band, our jazz band, and our chorus perform for over an hour. Raucous crowd. We had about 70 kids performing. It was the best spring concert I've ever seen in person in an elementary school. It was really impressive. I was just really proud of our kids and the recognition that they received that night. Next day at School Sing, they performed again, and they were able to do a Q&A with the crowd, and kids in the audience asked questions, and the musicians were just like professional. They were so proud of themselves and answering their questions about their craft. It was really good. So next year, you have to check it out. Reverse side, a couple of things just to highlight. Our 6th graders went on their Boston field trip on Monday. Successful day. It's nice to get them into a big city. Tomorrow we have our field day cookout, and that's pretty much an all-day event. And June 13th is our end of the school year extravaganza and slideshow. That's become tradition at Green Street. This will be the third or fourth year? Third year. And like I said at the last meeting, it's really turned into one of the special days at Green Street. Really a day of reflection of all the accomplishments of the kids throughout the year. There's a talent show, kids perform, teachers perform. It's a really fun way to end the year. A couple other things. Our Destination Imagination kids have provided some thank you cards to the school board, to Lyle, and to Frank Rucker. Send those around.
How'd they do?
Did I report on this last time?
No?
They were just, we had just arrived.
They were just about to leave.
Yeah,
So
and
did
there
they
was-
come back?
And there was a tornado in
Yeah.
Missouri that same day.
They had an absolute blast. Yeah, they had an absolute blast. Tracy has put together a PowerPoint slideshow showing off everything that they did, and I can forward that along to you guys. But
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
yeah, it was quite the experience. Really exciting. And then lastly, I think I reported that the New York Times visited us a few weeks ago. So our 4th grade classes. So those students have written opinion pieces that will be featured in the New York Times on June 30th. So a press release has been sent to the Reformer. So that should get out into the community. But June 30th, if you're at a newsstand, grab the New York Times. All of our students will be featured with
This
a
Thursday.
opinion piece.
No, June 30th.
June 30th.
June 30th.
And
The Sunday
I
edition.
assume all of
Sunday
it's gonna
nights.
be on Facebook and,
Oh, yeah.
you know, everything else, yeah.
We'll put all
The
that
other thing is
stuff
the comments.
Yes, yeah.
I just want to call out that this thank you card is addressed to, dear school board members, thank you, wonderful souls. They've set the bar high for thank you notes. I'm just doing that myself.
Speaking of the press, that was a good article in the Reformer about the after-school program.
Yeah, that was
That really shone brightly on what's going on, the things you were reporting on last month. I was
Yeah.
glad that the community also got to hear so much about it.
Yeah, I was happy that Chris was able to do that. And then lastly, I have a couple of small bids that have gone out, and we have numbers for. The first one is for our library ceiling. We have a failing ceiling. I don't know if you remember one of our meetings, the tiles are falling off. So we have 2 quotes, one from GPI Construction for $11,977, and one from Shine Through Windows for $27,000. So clearly, we're going to go with GPI Construction.
How much was the policy?
Pass it down, yeah. And then to replace the flooring in our student bathrooms, which is very much needed. We have two quotes again, one from S&S Painting for $14,750 and one from Lawton Flooring for $13,345. So again, the recommendation is to go with Lawton Flooring. And we have a bid out for energy efficient upgrade and with our electrical. We should get 3 quotes by next week. So we'll be able to report out on that next time.
And what was the number for Lawton Farm again?
It's right there.
It was 14 and 13.
13, 3, 45, 26. Okay. So we'll need, we'll do 2 motions. I would need a motion to approve a contract with GPI Construction for $11,977 for work on the library ceiling.
So moved.
I would second that.
Okay, any discussion before it finishes falling in? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And
That very high ceiling in the.
with the lights at the top. Yeah. And motion to approve a contract for the Green Street School bathroom flooring installation project with Lawton Flooring for $13,345.26.
So moved.
Second.
And all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All done. Thank you, Mark. Thank
Can
you.
I just see those names again?
Yep. I'll just sign them.
Thank you. Okay, the unstapled report is coming around.
Logistics are arranged,
You take one from each
one from
file.
each file.
Yep. So it's been a busy month at Academy School also. I noticed that Jody's caseload is missing from the social worker HCRS row, just so you're aware, but she's at the same amount of approximately 30 families. On the second page is where we've got some events to highlight. We have a lot of field trips that have been happening and that have happened. One that I wanted to mention that was really cool was a new thing that one of our 6th grade teachers, Sarah Morse, did. They brought their class to the Pinnacle View at the top of Putney Mountain, and the kids spent the night there.
They spent the night.
Yes,
Wow.
so they hiked up early in the day on a Thursday, they slept over, they did all their food prep and everything, and then they spent the next day hiking and took a different trail down. And I got to see a few pictures from that event, and the kids' faces were just sheer joy, and it was just an experience for a lot of them that I think
Was that one of those cold nights?
was a first. It was a little rainy, but it wasn't too cold. Yeah, they were okay, and they had gear, and it's something that came out of a Reading Street story about camping out, so they took that and ran with it and decided to camp. So that was a really neat connection to our literacy program. And
Kelly, where did they get all of the equipment? Did families have them or?
yep, they did. Families, they had it at home where they just kind of lent what they had, and everyone had what they needed, which was pretty cool. I think Sarah also did some work on her end to just get that in place, but yeah, pretty neat. Down below, under upcoming events, John and I are having lunch with some 4th graders who earned that via the SBAC. That's a tradition that we order Chinese food and they can buy a golden ticket to have lunch with us. So that's happening on Monday. The kids are really excited about that, and it's always really fun to just kind of have a formal, we call it a luncheon. We send out invitations. It's very fancy. We've got our moving up ceremony on the 17th at 6:30. So if you wanted to try to make it to each school, you probably could, but
Jerry and I both start at 5:30.
Oh, you both do, okay.
And then I'll be here.
And Mark's daughter will be graduating from the academy, so he's gonna be running, but it'll be a nice night for all of us. Under community events, we've got our last school sing coming up next Tuesday, the 11th. We'll present, I think we have 12 students who have not been absent once this year. So we'll give them their awards, and I don't know that it'll be a Tony Speranza level of a rock concert, but we're gonna do our best to have some fun with it. So Nick and I have been talking about what to do. Tomorrow night is Family Fun Night, which we're excited about. That's a yearly event that ACT puts on. We'll be cooking out. We've got a new grill to cook out on. We'll have bouncy houses and music, book fair. So that'll be a nice night. Hopefully the weather will be good. Feel free to stop by. After the last all-school sing, going back to that, we moved our parent tech workshop that was going to take place a week ago at night, and we put it right after all-school sing next week, hoping to get more of a turnout. So we'll be talking about summertime and screens and how to keep your kids, safe on the media that they have access to during the summertime, when it seems they have a little more time to be on the screens. If you were at Farmers Market this past weekend, you might have seen it was the Kids Day. So a group of enrichment students from 2nd grade went with a couple of staff members, and they sold pins for pollinators. They did some research about bees, and they realized that we don't have a lot of flowers that are the types that bees need. So they raised money to purchase flowers for our school grounds.
And they bought the flowers at the market.
They bought
They would build up a little money and then they'd go around and purchase some more plants.
Local business
Yeah, so
model.
the kids got to go and actually buy the
Yeah.
flowers themselves.
It was really sweet. And they're still selling the pins in the lobby in the morning, so I've got my pin. Pretty cool that they did that. Over the past week, we had 80 staff members trained in Stop the Bleed. That's something that the other schools were all kind of working on getting done. I just want to give a shout out to the Brattleboro Fire Department. They are amazing and patient, and they came and did this training for free, and they supplied the gauze, and we went through a lot of it. And it's expensive, and they put in a ton of time with us, and they were just so patient in answering all of our questions, and it was really empowering for staff to know that they can help somebody if they're injured in a way that needs immediate medical attention, and it could make or break someone's life. So it's nice to know that we're trained in that. We also had transition meetings yesterday, same model as Mark. Receiving teachers and current teachers talk about kids. We talk a lot about their strengths and what they need to be successful. It's a really great day, and so it's kind of nice to just focus on social and emotional factors in that case. And then at our benchmark meetings next week, we'll talk about specific academic supports for those kids too. Other than that, my only other thing is I had 2 hires that I need action on. One, it's a little tricky. So if you remember back to maybe a month or so ago, you had approved Jean Schultz. She is a current 2nd grade teacher, and she moved to academic support. And she has now been transferred to an 80% academic support position via the article in the contract with transferring. That's something that was good for her, and she's worked with those kids in this year, so she's a really skilled interventionist. Those kids will be in 3rd and 2nd grade coming in, so she'll be a prime person for that job, because we had someone join the central office team from Academy. So that left an opening back at the full-time academic support. So we advertised that. Wendy Cusimano from Academy, current employee, teaching 2nd grade, applied for that position. So I'd like to hire her for that position. So that would be the first motion. And I didn't do a sheet for her because she's a current teacher, but I can tell you more about her if you're interested.
I'm quite familiar with
Yes, Robin's kids had both had her.
So that was her desire to switch positions
Yes.
from the classroom to that more
Yes.
small
Yeah,
group.
so
and
your
one-on-one
whole second
with-
grade team is going into
It's
academic
going to be
support
a new
almost.
team, yes. Yeah. And it's actually, what we've been working on is getting really skilled teachers in those academic support positions because they're the gap closers.
Yeah.
And so to have people like Jean and Wendy in those positions is really ideal. They're very skilled with math and literacy. And they've both been teaching a long time and they know our school, of course, which helps. But
Did we already hire somebody for Jean's classroom position?
yes,
Okay,
that was at
that was
the-
last
that
time.
John, yeah, those 2 meetings ago,
Okay,
yeah.
So you do need
So
a
we need
motion at this
a
point?
motion for Wendy to be approved to be the academic support teacher.
okay. I'll say with regret and congratulations, I move that we accept that recommendation.
Second?
And second?
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 I'm just glad she stayed. So that leaves another second grade opening, which it's June and I wanted to move quickly on. So we have found a candidate who is exceptional and I attached her new hire information. Her name's Amanda Paradise. She is a current teacher at Newbrook Elementary School. She's been teaching first grade there. Master's in teaching for social justice. And Brian Bittner has worked with her quite a bit, our literacy coach, who you're probably familiar with from his presentations here. But he named her as just a top tier educator. She constantly is seeking out ways to better her own practice and attends trainings put on by RSU when we open them to other people, which I thought was pretty admirable. She'll be a great fit. She knows some of our staff members already. She's really dynamic. She's a real leader. So I'd love to bring her into the second grade classroom that's being vacated by Wendy.
I move that we accept the recommendation to hire Amanda Paradise.
Second? The nodding second?
I'm just,
Second, just reading.
Thanks.
does she pronounce it paradise or paradis?
Well, we say paradise. I think it's paradise, but there's no E.
I've heard her say parody. I know.
Have you?
I have heard her say that, but I think that she goes back and forth herself.
Yeah. It's like Dias Dias. Nobody
Yeah.
really knows.
I heard her say parody.
All right, that's why I was
Yeah.
pondering.
Well, we will find out.
We will ask her herself.
We won't really get that wrong. Okay, so I have a motion to accept the recommendation to hire Amanda Paradise for a second grade position at Academy School. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully that's all of our big hires. We've got a few special ed left, but
That's how.
Lyle
The
probably has a thing or
Just a
two.
couple.
Oh, really?
Do we need to do, yes, we should. Yes, yes, a battery motion. Yeah, we should do that. So a couple of things. I'll start with May 24. It was the Equity Summit. The Vermont Principals Association has had 3 equity summits, north, middle, and this was a southern location. It's been based on equity. Ours has gotten really excellent reviews, and I want to credit with the fact that we had Dottie Morse, who you all know, as one of our presenters, but we also had Michaela, part of the planning, and Michaela and Dottie also did training of student table facilitators, and that's been different from all the other locations throughout the state. Students had always been invited, but we really felt like it was important to have student voice. One of our sort of group norms was that the student table facilitator needed to be the first one to speak. So all of the questions and discussions, we started with students. It was Michaela's students. We had some student facilitators from the Boys and Girls Club. The feedback that I have been able to look at so far has been excellent. And I don't know if you want to say anything from the student point of view, if you've had any feedback from the students?
They had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, they all had a lot of fun. They didn't complain at all. I did get yelled at for getting back to school late. They wanted But other than that, they had a good time. I know. They want to be back at 3:30. They say I do the mom thing. I start talking to people. So
So
that was good.
I thought it was great.
I had fun. Did you have fun, Lyle?
Yes, I did have fun. No, I don't think any of we had some board members from other boards, but so.
That was the same day as the World
Yes,
Cafe.
exactly. We were actually
That was
just
a
down the
busy
road
day.
from you.
That's right.
Okay,
It was a busy day.
May was professional development month for me. The VSBA and the superintendents have a combined training. We did that. Carrie Emidon, the board chair for the supervisory union, and I attended that together. And then the next day was special ed directors and superintendents, as well as Kelly, a couple of other principals around, went to a session, two-day sessions on Act 173 and implementation and getting ready for that. I have to say it was that and the other one I'm going to talk about are the two best professional development that I feel like the Vermont Superintendents Association has provided us. We were able to work together as a team. How we're going to move forward with the Act 173 implementation. We'll be taking that to the leadership meeting on Friday, moving forward. So I don't know, Kelly, if you want to say anything else about it. It looked like social emotional needs are where we really need to put a lot of our focus in the next year or so.
Yeah, and the workshops that I went to were really well done, and I learned a lot about the idea from the state of differentiating instruction in classrooms and also co-teaching, that there's several models out there, not just one, and that we could really do a lot with it if we were mindful and had the right training. Yeah, it was pretty impactful.
And the other professional development that the Vermont Superintendents Association provided was for central office admin teams. So Paul Smith, Julian Egan, Shelley Wilson, Marisa Duncan-Hawley, Frank Rucker, and I went to that last week. And the focus of that was how we as central office administrators assist principals in becoming instructional leaders and putting instructional leadership as the prime focus. And one of the things that when I talk with principals is they want to be really good instructional leaders, but whatever comes to the door next ends up taking them away from being able to be in classrooms and providing that support for teachers. So again, it was amazing. We had people from the University of Washington there working with us, and the central office team will be working with principals on that throughout the next year. So.
What did they say was the sort of key to shifting from like putting out fires to that instructional focus?
So a few things, and they give a few things as examples, but really wanted to work for you. So one of the things that came out for us was, and principals haven't heard this yet, so.
Just curious.
I've got,
It sounded like such a hard topic to solve. I was like,
I'm actually
Turn off
glad
the camera.
that I've got all of you here to protect me in case there's something. Doing sort of a mini time study so that principals can start to identify what is it that they do every single day. And then identifying, was this that I did so important that it kept me from, that it needed to keep me from going into a classroom? Is it a parent complaint? Is it a kid blowing out of class? So just identifying those first and then categorizing them and seeing what is it that's more important than being in the classroom. And then working more with Andy Pachuli, and working with our academic coaches to go in and do observations, so that if I'm looking at a math lesson, I've got Team Read with me, and we come out after looking at that math lesson and really talk about, so what kind of feedback should I be giving the teacher on that lesson? And the same for literacy, the same for using Greg Stoller for classroom management. So those were the things that we prioritized.
I'm sorry. In listening to you speak, Lyle, it reminded me, at Green Street next year, actually been thinking a lot about this. we're hiring an instructional coach for the school. It's not a new position in terms of a budget item, but it's a repurposed position. So a couple of months ago, I put it out to the staff to generate some interest. Went through a process and have identified Bryn Tucker to be the instructional coach at Green Street next year. And her focus will be on providing leadership to academic teams around curriculum planning, intervention, enrichment, instruction. So I think it's a new position in our SU, I believe, for individual schools, but it's not a new concept. Many schools have hired these positions, but I think I'm excited. I think it's going to be a big bang for the buck in the long run.
Is that a redefinition of Bryn's previous
Yes.
job?
Yep. Yeah.
What was she?
She was an academic support teacher. So throughout the year next year, I can report out on the progress of that and how effective it has been. But
So she's basically changing from supporting students to supporting teachers to support students.
exactly, but she'll still be working with students as well.
Okay.
Gonna do some modeling lessons, doing lessons with teachers, some co-teaching as well. So it'll be a combination of coaching and modeling and a lot of meeting, a lot of planning, a lot of curriculum planning. But I'm excited about it because it is difficult with being one principal in the building. You're all over the place. Half the time I don't even eat lunch. But to have somebody who's as talented as her, and we have many people in our school who are talented like that, to be focused on being an instructional leader, I think it's a concept that's going to take off over the next few years.
So in the, I mean, not you said just before you said that, there was something that maybe, I think it was when you were talking about the principals and instructional leaders and as a goal. Was there any conversation or any focus on restorative justice in terms of?
Not
I'm
at
not
these
sure that that's
conferences.
directly related.
Yeah, not at these conferences, but we know, like, John's been putting together a grant with Mike. Mikhail's been working on it. I've been working on it. Julianne's been working on it. So it's a focus throughout WSCSU. We're hoping with this grant that it will be a more coordinated effort. And right now, of course, Mike's been pushing it at the BU6 complex, John at Academy, the counselor in Putney doing it there. Mark started it in Vernon and then brought it to Green Street. But we really need a coordinated effort, and that's what I'm hoping that Mike will be able to oversee when we get this. When we get this grant. Think positive.
Think positive, yes. So Mark, is that instructional leader, they're a peer, is that a full-time position? As a teacher, what's their relation?
97%, same as her AST contract was.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a peer, yes, it's not a
It's a peer,
supervision.
it's not part of supervision
No,
or,
no.
just wanted to clarify that, where it's not adding administration, it's a code, essentially a kind of peer-teacher relationship.
Exactly. Yep, good clarification.
Another opportunity for teachers to expand what they do.
Yep.
Thank you. Anything on that, John, since Charlie's on?
Now's my moment. Is this
What's
my
the
moment?
what's the rest of the story?
We never, when Charlie was working with Andy, we hardly ever heard her voice.
Nope, she summed it up very well.
Great. Okay. I think we have for some reason, we have a short agenda tonight. We are committee reports, and our unfinished business includes, the only thing is what we've been talking about for a few weeks, uses of education reserve fund balance. And so let me introduce, well, an update for information, because the last meeting we talked a lot about it, and then there was a question about whether we needed to contact the lawyer, and the board voted to have us contact the lawyer, which we did. And his opinion was that we would need, if we wanted to designate that money for some particular use, that was not replacing borrowing, which is what the article said. We would have to go to a town meeting. And so, which I don't think, well, I can't contact everybody and ask about it, but in conversation with him, it seemed pretty obvious that we would, hurrying into a meeting in 30 days to try and get something done was probably not the wisest thing to do. And because Brattleboro has a representative town meeting, the chances of having a quorum show up at the end of June to talk about that was pretty slim. So it made a lot more sense for us to talk about it again and figure out what we want to do. There are a number of things we can do.
To basically make a recommendation instead of a legally binding.
Yeah, absolutely. And the only thing I wanted to, somewhat defensively, because one of and I spoke with him about this, Dick DeGray mentioned that we should have been doing this a long time ago, and I just wanted to point, I went back and checked the dates to make sure I was right, and we received the order from the Agency of Education on November 30th, and we had to start the process of merging. And on December 5th was our most immediate meeting after that, and I asked that the use of reserve fund be put on the agenda, and it was. And it was put on the next agenda, which would have been 14 days, the 19th. And from the 19th until I took over as chair, and those two things didn't necessarily align, but I sort of made sure that we got to it. But it got tabled week after week, or meeting after meeting after meeting, and for a very good reason. Obviously, we had our hands full. We were here past 8 o'clock many nights, and it wasn't pressing, didn't seem to be a need. So anyway, I just wanted to say that we certainly made a good effort to try and get that done. But so we're in a position now to figure out what recommendation would we like to make, and then if we want to follow it up. Yeah.
Are you able to speak a little bit to the discussion of the budget at the merged meeting? I read through the notes from the meeting on May 22nd, and in the minutes of the new merged board, under the budget, it says that the document referring to the budget proposal reflects intentional use of fund balances as contemplated by individual school boards. And then there was later a discussion about that in relation to capital plans. Would any capital projects be warned? A member of the public brought up the role of the public in that. So I'm just wondering if you, as a member of that merged board, could give us any kind of background on that, because I think that's related to how we make a recommendation, so that some of what we, as the Brattleboro Town School Board, would like to see those that fund balance used towards. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the first part of that, the intentional use as identified by the boards, is referring to the capital plans that everybody, I think, that Dummerston has. And that if there was an intention for something to happen down the line on those capital plans, and there was a reserve fund that could be used for it, then it would be. But and particularly if it had been designated, or actually specifically if it had been, like if there was going to be, if we needed to put a new roof under the gym, which they don't, fortunately. And they had contracted somebody or had bids and everything was in the work was in the works. That's exactly what would happen.
But there's two different reserve funds, the capital reserve fund and the general reserve fund. So
Okay.
I would assume that sentence is if you're saying that they were talking about capital plans, that they're talking about the capital reserve funds
Right.
should be used for the plan that the school already approved.
Right.
That's basically what that says?
Yes.
Well, the wording here, and I know these are unapproved minutes,
Yes.
so acknowledging that. Document reflects intentional use of fund balances. It's not saying capital fund.
It
fund
doesn't even
balances.
say what document they're talking about, though.
And as contemplated.
The budget.
It's very vague. That's why I was asking for some feedback. As contemplated by individual school boards. That's contemplated is different than ensconced in a capital plan.
Right.
So I'm just trying to figure out if we're going to make a recommendation. We have had this item on our agenda a couple of times recently, and the members of the public that have come and spoken most directly to it that I recall came speaking about projects contemplated for energy use at Oak Grove School that were part of a study done a number of years ago, and it was to complete those projects. I think there were perhaps some other things mentioned, but that group has been pretty consistently coming and lobbying.
Right.
And I was having a hard time getting up to speed at the last meeting because we were talking about legal advice. So I'm now just trying to get an update on, could we make a proposal that, not speaking of the projects that are already in the capital fund, but can we make a proposal that would fit into the sense of the merged board of an intention to use some of our reserve fund to do a specific project that's not mentioned in the capital fund?
Is
That's what I'm
that,
trying.
but are the things that they were asking to have completed, are they the
No.
same things that are in this plan or no?
No, most of the things in the Oak Grove plan, the Oak Grove audit are not in the capital plan because the boiler is not, they're not urgent. The other ones, so Mark's boiler and the boilers in the academy were urgent at that point, and the controls and things. And so they are not in the capital plan. And being there means that they're going to be with all the other things that are in the capital plan going forward, and annually the board will decide which of those gets funded and happens. But as far as, so yes, we can say, propose to the merged board that we have this money. At the end of the audit, there's going to be some number, quite likely, unless we have a deficit all of a sudden in excess of $500,000 that's going to be undesignated, it's reserved.
But they were
And we would
asking
like
about
them-
something else besides
Please,
the
Rob,
boiler,
please,
right?
wait, finish. It,
I'm unclear, what were they
we
asking
can-
for?
well, hold on a second. So we can ask them to use it for those purposes.
I'm just wondering if there are things that we already are asking in this plan. Because I feel like one of the things that people kept mentioning was about the windows. And that's in here, $50,000 for 2021 and $50,000 for 2022.
At Oak Grove?
Yes. So that's what I was just wondering, how much of the things that they asked are we already, this is essentially an intention of commitment from our board that's already been approved
Right.
and, reviewed by the town meeting members as well. So that seems to be pretty binding. I was just wondering how much of the stuff, what were they asking for that was not already designated?
Well, the biggest thing is the boiler project.
Right, but the boiler is not that old.
Right,
It's from
So,
2009.
It wouldn't be something we would contemplate anyway,
right.
Right.
The,
so I don't feel comfortable.
No, definitely. But the changing over, even if the boiler weren't changed, converting from steam heat to hot water was one of the most urgent recommendation in the audit as far as energy savings, which is what really happened. But the other things, I would think that the insulation things and things like that probably are in there. But the big one, $320,000 was the replacing steam heat, and then another $60,000 to replace the pellet boiler.
But the letters that I've gotten from parents are all asking about the roof, the windows, and the glass block.
Right.
They didn't mention anything about the boiler in these
Right.
requests.
Right, yeah.
And-
And those things,
Well, because you're talking about moving to steam heat. I mean, the heat's fine in the building, correct? It's just an energy saver. It's not.
money saver.
Right, it's not per se something that
It's not
is going to affect the children in terms of education because it's freezing cold,
Right.
so.
Yeah, I think
They must have all talked to each other, because they all say roof insulation, rotten windows, and the glass block.
yeah, and if you look at the audit, if you go for number 4, if you're on that, on that page, from insulating the attic walls all the way down to replacing the windows, there's 7 items there, and they total $187,000.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing in these letters as well. And then I see in our capital plan, we have the roofing. There's 3 different line items for phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 that are planned for. One, I guess, already happened, because there's one that was in 2019, and then 2 for 2020 and 2021, and then for the windows, 2021 and 2022. And I don't know if that includes the glass block as a window, or if that counts as something else.
Well, there is a window, there are just old windows that need to go out, and then the glass block is
I'm not sure where to look for that.
it's not,
But
yeah, I'm not sure. If you read more carefully the narrative, you could explain it. But I think that those are in there because they're probably the most urgent, the places where the most heat is going out the windows or up to the roof.
Right.
So that's why they're there.
I'm just wondering if we need to act to grant the request of all these people that came to the meeting, or if that in effect is already happening because we put it in the plan.
Those
As
things
that's
are-
as much
yeah.
of a commitment as we can give for the use of our money, is much more than the recommendations that we would make tonight for general reserve fund uses. Is like, it's in the capital plan already, then that's kind of as much of a legally binding commitment as possible.
Yeah. That's true.
So are those 7 items all included in the capital plan?
I don't know if they are or not. I don't have it in front of me to look at, although if you
Obviously, the
like.
boiler is not.
No, the boiler's
Yeah,
not,
it's-
no.
It says
That's
projected
not-
for like 2035 or something.
Right.
So this
And
is.
I don't think anyone's pushing for the boiler, so it's too new. I do think,
There's a $70,000 roofing, so that is,
There's 70,000 and then there's 2 other $50,000 different year.
yeah, the roofing here is 10,000. So I'm not sure what so that probably includes a lot, but there's insulating the attic and attic walls, there's a ceiling insulation and building roof insulation, so those all may be in that 70,000.
Yeah,
I mean, that's almost half of what the whole thing costs.
but the 70,000 one must already be done, because that says FY 2019.
I
Oh, no, that's
feel like
something else.
we pushed it out a
Yeah,
year
yeah.
because
Oh.
something else came up over at Oak Grove that we needed,
Okay,
was
Yeah.
higher need.
Yeah, and it's in 2020, and that's probably those, there was a
Yeah.
major roofing project that they had to do.
so
So the 70,000, so half of it, almost half of it is in the capital plan already, so that will proceed next in the 2020 budget.
and there's 50,000 for the windows too, so that's more than that, that's 120,000. But they're asking for 180 to 200,000
Yeah.
commitment
The
for these
windows-
items.
Oh, the windows are the next year. There are 250,000s in the windows, so
Yeah.
that would probably
And there's
be
two
the
50,000
blocks.
for the roof too.
Yeah, that would be the EFCO windows are 43,000, and what window quilts? I think the 1975 retrofit in the second floor has to be the blocks.
That
Well,
must
I don't
be.
think that's all of it. But, yeah, so most of it is in there. So,
if, let me ask a process question here. If you have a surplus
Just found this one.
at the end of the year, do we ever move items forward in a capital plan that were put further down the road, just because the whole point of a capital plan is to even the bumps in the road and to make a plan ahead? But when there is a surplus, is there ever an argument to move something forward, especially something that's related to energy savings, that the earlier it's done, the sooner the benefit comes? Or is the capital plan sort of, once it's written, it's left like as though written in stone?
I doubt that it's written. So we haven't really, I mean, I can't speak to
Just curious about
experience.
precedent.
I can't speak to experience on the school board because we've only had a capital plan for a couple of years. But typically, if you look at what's there and you look at what's available, what resources you have, and you do everything you possibly can for that year, and to avoid having, you know, get 600,000 this year, it's gonna be 12 next year, then you might lose some things to either way, either direction to make work, and that's something that would happen during the budget process.
And it happened, it can't be in stone because I know we ended up moving the roof because something else came up that was of higher priority.
Yeah.
Right, sorry, I don't remember what that was, but
So.
No, it's a plan,
it's.
and
Yeah,
that's important.
so we could make, just, again, I'm just asking for the process. We could make a recommendation, this board, to spend a specific amount of money to complete recommended improvements at Oak Grove School using the reserve fund. We may not be, the merge board may not be legally bound to pursue that, but would that be of use to do that? The other question, not to muddy the waters, but I think another parent had mentioned there's a current plan to redo the playground at Oak Grove School. And I was curious with this, just in point of information, are playgrounds at our elementary schools generally done through fundraising or done through budget process?
Both.
Both.
Yes, they've been supplemented by fundraising for sure, but they've also been supported in the budget.
Okay.
I think what the parents were asking for was help. They
Exactly.
weren't asking for the school board to fund the whole thing, they were saying, help us
Yeah,
put the money.
well, that,
in
but
this."
that was another part of their request, that they were activated to come, they were, the public was invited to come and have input. A group of parents came and gave input, and the things they mentioned were energy improvements and help with the playground.
I think it would be important for the new principal, for Mary, to be able to take this information, assess it, and then create a plan
Yeah.
based on
And
it.
she'll certainly be involved in the budgeting, well, not just the building of the budget for 21, or whatever it is, but also how the current budget gets allocated. Yeah, I think oh, I asked Jerry if there was a number when we started this process, there's a number for what they were proposing for the playground. And if there wasn't, there were a number of things that they had in mind and a number of different costs. It was not a lot of money compared to $187,000 worth of energy.
Yeah,
But we
I
certainly
don't see
could-
any
we
specific
certainly-
numbers on that.
No, there aren't, I don't think there will be. They might be, we're meeting again on the 19th, and there might be some of them we could ask for playground use.
If we're getting into playground equipment, I can tell you for sure that we're talking big dollars.
I think it was, well, I don't recall.
I mean,
whether-
their projects may not be that.
Yeah, I feel like what some of the discussion was more about creating a more rich natural area.
Yeah, different areas in that space, more variety of space.
I think
You
a
know about
rock is-
playgrounds.
A rock is expensive though, unless they get it donated.
Yes, I remember we got a big
Yes.
boulder donation for the Academy School playground. That was like,
It's kind of amazing.
Yeah, it's
yeah.
So our timeline here, are we able to act as late as the next board meeting?
Yeah, we can, yeah, absolutely.
So we
Up
could
until
try to-
July,
we could-
up until July 1st,
We
we can make a recommendation.
could make a recommendation with specific numbers, and how would we, should we have a subcommittee come up with that proposal that could then be voted on, up or down?
Well, I think if.
So that we're not just
anything-
repeating this discussion here
Yeah.
in 2 weeks.
No, I think anything that we can, if anything we can decide, we should probably try to decide tonight. If we want to ask, if we want to recommend that they support the playground at a certain level, that the unified board support at a certain level, then we should get an estimate and give that to them, and that can happen at any time. But we should decide that we want to do that tonight. Right, we prefer that we decide that tonight, so that it's not.
Without a
surprise.
specific number?
Yeah, and then we could attach it. Yeah, we wouldn't necessarily have to present to them until we have one, we would just send it to them back on forward.
And could a similar motion be directed toward energy, or does that need to be a more specific?
Well, I think that's.
Or are we just saying
it's
this is
rather pointed
sufficient
out,
here?
Yeah, I think it's in the plan. I think it gradually has found its way in there.
Well, I would make a motion that we support the improvements at the playground
That we recommend
that we recommend that the board direct some, and should it be, would my motion reflect that the funds would come from the surplus or be part of the next year's, would be part of a budget process?
That's
Well, it's the same
interesting.
thing. It's the same thing.
Well,
because
you
they're
think
gonna
so,
own
but
money.
it's an interesting question which we'll have to explore with the attorney at some point, because one of the things that he said was that, and I may have not understood this exactly right, but I asked him twice, and it seemed like he said the same thing both times, that that fund, that education reserve fund, because of the way it's written, using it for a capital project like that, would be, unless we were gonna have to borrow, we'd have to go to the town meeting for that. So I think, very long story short, the education funds that we all have, using them to reduce taxes the way we have, just using as revenue without specific uses, is, he said that the age of education might be unhappy with that.
What, unhappy with what we already have done
What we've been
last
doing
year,
for years, and
instance.
what the town meeting voted to let us do, so we wouldn't have to come every time and ask to take it out of reserve and spend it on it.
The automatic rollover.
Yeah, so we'll need to follow up with that.
But
Hopefully
to
we'll
address
do
what
that.
you just said, Andy,
Because
this money is gonna be owned by the other board. So whether we say use our general fund or put it in the budget, it's really kind of the same thing. But if we have language about the general fund, it's like we're saying, guys, remember, we gave you all that money, so you should do the thing that we're asking. It's not really like it's gonna be out of a different bank account. It's more just like, reminding that we've given a lot of money to the new school district and that we should be seeing some of the benefits of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes?
Could the board approve something like, so say there was $60,000 left over, could you agree that playground would be what the money would go to and do like 20,000 for each school?
We
Versus
could
just
ask
one?
for that. I mean, we're in a position where what we can do is recommend that the new board do that. The complication is that it's in a reserve fund, which will become part of a reserve fund for the unified board, and it's not designated for anything like that, so we'd have to wait a year. We would ask them to put that in the budget for next year, if we wanted to do it that way. Or we could go to the annual meeting and move from the floor, and then they put $20,000. Just add that to the
that
budget,
we already-
yeah. But then the tax rate would go up as a result of that, even though the reserve fund would be there to cover it. But that would be, we could make that calculation.
It seems like they're all reasonable people. And
Yeah.
I think they'll hear, this is something that we've been talking about for a few months now. It's been in our plan. If we weren't to merge, this would be where we would be putting our money. I think they'll hear that. I don't think any of them are unreasonable.
To make it as a non-dollar specific amount, but to say that we've articulated goals about these energy projects at Oak Grove School and about supporting a request for playground assistance, a rebuilding of the playground at Oak Grove School, and just make it a recommendation without dollar amounts?
Well, I have in my notes to talk with Jerry to see if we can get a number before next week, not next week, the 19th, our next meeting. So we may be able to, by the 19th, have something more specific, but
So do we
For
need
this.
a motion now to make that recommendation that can be
I
voted
guess
on?
the thing, because it's not in their plan, right?
it's not in Oak Grove's capital plan.
Right. I mean, I'd love to say, hey, I'll take 20 grand for Green Street too. I haven't prioritized it in the plan because we got bigger fish to fry.
Same.
But I think all three schools are in a similar position in that way.
We
I think
have a
the-
rotten structure right now that needs to be replaced, and the insurance
Yeah, I
company.
think there's no question about it. I think the reason that we're focusing on Oak Grove is because the energy proposals that were made for that school have not been carried out, and there's a lot of heat going out the window. The parents added the playground, so obviously, I shouldn't say added it, I'm sorry, they encouraged us to support it because I think children were kids, so that's where that's coming from. It's not a request from the.
It does seem like it's very
But our
early on in
parents
their
would-
process, though, where they haven't even gotten
My
a
parents would
plan yet.
easily come
Yeah.
to
Yes,
this state
yeah, I know.
with
Sure.
requests.
That's why it's on the
Yeah.
table.
I personally, as a board member, would be happy to make that part of the recommendation for general playground improvement in the Brattleboro Town Schools. I'm not trying to advocate for one school. I know that the Oak Grove energy stuff has been articulated, and some of it's in the capital plan, and some of it isn't. And as I said a couple meetings ago, this is a unique situation where we're passing a large amount of money to a new entity. So there's a political moment here where the Brattleboro Town School Board can make a recommendation. And we could just let it pass and just cross our fingers and hope for the
Come
best.
to the board and advocate for
Or
that
we could
next
make
year.
a recommendation. And I have no problem with including playground improvement at all of our town schools.
I mean, I
How's the
think,
playground at DES here?
well, Doug's
So they just rebuilt it because they had to clean it up.
We use
And EES, you have federal funds, so you need to, you can't
Right,
just.
I'm sure West Beacon is a playground.
I mean, in my capital plan, I have designated money for our playground for the system.
I mean, I think that
So I think each school has to like,
I would assume and hope that the unified board is going to conflate all of these capital plans into one massive capital plan and try and respect the timeline that each school had for replacing their stuff. I don't feel really concerned that they're gonna be like, forget this, we're doing our own thing with the money. You know, I mean, how else would they decide to prioritize this than all of the work that's already been done on saying, here's when we need these things?
And I'm hoping that the merged board will create a buildings and ground subcommittee, and they'll have the capital plans from each school and can start looking at that and putting them together and prioritizing, like, you know, Oak Grove roof, if it's leaking, needs to be.
Right, I mean, this is, ours is already, I believe, right, prioritized between the three schools of like, well, this year we're gonna do that project, it's already like kind of
Yeah.
inherent in the document, so I would hope that they kind of respect the timeline that's been already created by these schools, and I feel like this is the most legally binding thing that we can give to the new board as far as what happens to our buildings and grounds, is the plan that's already been made and approved.
And those, all the four capital plan, the three that, well, the UHS as well, so the four plans that exist are in, but they're in the back of the, well, actually, are they in the news? They're probably not in the newsprint thing, the things being printed.
Are you talking about
But there was a,
town
that's the
meeting?
capital plan for the, just like this is the budget for the combined districts, this is the capital plan. They're stapled together and it's all I can't imagine, other than judgment and dealing with things that blow up and you don't expect it, I can't imagine they approach it any other way.
Yeah.
Just, that's not going to, it's always been that way, it's not going to change. I hope.
So Robin, are you recommending that we use existing documents and not add more to the fray?
I don't feel like we need a new motion to advocate for the things that the parents ask for as far as energy improvements, because as I understand it, those are already in the plan, and that's something that has more power than a motion that we would make at this point anyway. I think the playground thing isn't in the capital plan, so that's something that's not covered by what we just said, but I think there is some validity to what the other administrators are saying, that like, well, maybe we should wait till that's in the capital plan, have gotten more extensive plans of what it is that they're asking for and how much money they want from us, and having input from the new principal, rather than a sort of vague and non-binding recommendation from us that just says fund the playground improvements. I mean, I want them to have a better playground there. I'm not against that. It seems like sort of shoehorning this in very early in their process because of the deadline of when the money is going to get turned over from us to the other district.
Yeah,
I
no.
see nodding. Okay. So we're going to sit on that. I guess is what's it. And I think too, probably, Kelly, do you have playground stuff in the capital?
We don't. It's, last summer we had a visit from
our insurance company, and we discovered that there's rot on the wood that supports our kindergarten. We call it the kindergarten structure. So it needs
That's
to be
next.
replaced, but we've had to prioritize our addition,
Right.
replacing the White House, all that.
Right.
But it is, I mean, this conversation is timely in that way that we don't want to ask for more than, we've already got planned, but there are things like that that are really important.
Yeah.
And we've had some injuries in the past couple of weeks of young kids on that structure because it's high and they're falling. So I would love to replace it with something shorter, more developmentally appropriate and safe.
Yeah, and attractive to get kids out.
Sure,
and
yeah,
get on it.
yeah.
Just,
Okay.
David,
Yes.
what, and I don't know how legal it would be. I mean, what's to say we don't just say from this year's budget, we're giving each school so much money?
For the routing of
Obviously,
your,
it's an
of that
emergency
structure,
situation.
that might be something that, it emerged and we've got some, we can move money, because we can move money, obviously, from place to place if it's available, but I think if we, we look on June 29th and there's, $16,000 and say, well, why don't we, before we close the books and start to figure out, why don't we buy that structure?
I mean, I think normally we would be like, what just happened with the library thing, like, you would come and say, here, I got these 2 bids for the new structure, and then we could say, okay, here, we moved and we spend that money on the thing.
Right.
And if there's money left in the building improvement line or the building and grounds line or something like that,
Right.
actually, that might be something that would be wise to do. I can't believe this.
Would you like us to do this for the
Well,
next?
no, but there's
the
this,
last
there's
meeting?
this idea, and this is a really good example of
Right.
why it doesn't hold water. But this idea that, oh, it's June, I haven't spent my whole budget, gotta spend it because we'll never see it again. But it actually goes into that reserve fund, and then we've got it for things that come up that we really want to do.
Right.
So, so I can't believe I'm saying, well, if there's any money left in buildings and grounds,
Well,
get
I
a
mean,
contract.
if you said Kelly and Mark, and maybe Jerry's not here, but come to our last meeting together with some ideas and a basic price line for something that would be appropriate, then we could talk to our maintenance crew and do that. And the worst that we get is no.
I mean,
Yeah.
Mark has 20,000 for next year already coming,
Great.
so he has something in mind with that argument.
I'm not sure the Oak Grove project is a repair project like yours. It's more like trying to revision a playground.
But I feel like Jerry did say something of old structures that needed to be replaced. I feel like I heard that as well, as they're trying to, envision something really different than what they currently have. But there is also some
I think
replacement.
preschool might, do they need to have newer equipment because they have to have different regulations? for
Oh, maybe that was
preschool.
what she said. I remember her saying something about replacing the current equipment, which is old.
So how about if we take the really prudent and cautious approach and ask Lyle to sit down with Frank and the administrative team and see what options are available with current current budget, where there might be resources that could be either shifted or depleted.
Because really, each budget year, it's our job
Yeah,
to
yeah,
present a
Yes.
plan
yeah.
that makes sense and is not, overwhelming for the town, but it's reasonable.
Yeah.
And that's what we did, and I think that's what we should follow. There are cases where maybe there's safety issues that we weren't aware of, and then that's when, okay, we can't be putting our kids in danger. Come to the board, here's an emergency situation, here's my plan to solve it, would you support it?
It seems like this is something, the Oak Grove project, that they would be asking for the upcoming budget.
Right.
Once they have a plan, that's what they would have done normally. But it's because of this situation where we said, hey, guys, what should we do with this money, community people? That people turned up and said, well, how about for this? Because that's what we're looking forward towards next
Yeah,
year.
it creates
It sort of
that
compressed the
tension.
time that we would have to really look at and consider what should the budget be and how much should come from the school board budget for that.
And to be fair to Mary, as she, gets started at Oak Grove, she'll be able to assess what are the, really important elements to improve the school community. And she'll work with parents, she'll work with teachers, she'll work with kids. But that's how we go about budgeting on a year-to-year basis.
Okay. So,
An argument could be made that energy efficiency is in the same category as rotting wood. Because we're living in a time of essentially disrepair of our infrastructure in terms of the waste of energy and the effect on our world. And one could make the argument that there is a pressure to do energy improvements on a short, as soon as possible timeline as there is to repair rotting wood on an existing play structure. It's also part of a larger, maybe that's too philosophical, I'll own it if it is, but I think that's the kind of change of mind that also legitimately led to, here is a bunch of money, here is a project that might not be viewed as a priority by a new entity, but is viewed as a priority here at Brattleboro, where at our most recent representative town meeting, one of the most passionate things that happened was redirecting money to energy efficiency, sustainability. So that, there wasn't just like, party, there's a lot of extra money, everybody come. It was part of that, to be fair to the process. It was that vision. Is this a moment in time when a decision could be made to facilitate a true improvement that would not only have economic benefits, but in a larger sense, environmental benefits that are in line with an emerging consensus in this town as a priority. It wasn't just, there's extra money here, let's open up the checkbook.
And I agree with that, and my response would be, well, each school has a plan, and it's right here for doing that.
I mean, some of this, I think it probably is in our budget already, because it says it's for FY 2020, so that would have been the budget that we just got approved by that merged board, right? That already has this spending in it for the roofing phase 3, or maybe that's gonna have to be phase 2 since we didn't do phase 2 yet. And then the window things and the other roofing part is the subsequent year, so that's where you'd be, if we were to designate, like, we gotta spend all this energy money right now, we'd be moving up the timeline on that window project, but I think the roof one, you probably couldn't move it up too much because of how the things have to be done in a certain order, the timeline.
So I think we're kind of driving over
we've done
terrain at this point.
I think we've done it for now.
We've done justice to that, to the Oak Grove concern. We also had a proposal from the Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice Department.
We're floating the name.
Office of the WSCSU Office of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice. And it was at the point where we were considering actually designating, now we're at the point of talking about recommending to the unified board. And this obviously is in the area of supporting the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice, which I think because we've been looking at this for at least 3 years, sort of consciously or talked about it, and looking into trainings and equity and gender and some diversity training activities with the administrators. This is maybe an opportunity where we can, I don't want to editorialize too much here, but where we can actually make a significant contribution to the work that we committed to when we hired the partnership for this, this recent hiring process, as long as that money will last. And this might be an opportunity to start the process of deepening that along the lines of what Michaela's talked here in terms of conferences. And well, I'll let you address this, but one of the things that really stood out for me is the taking students with you to a college that has a department with a highly diverse student body, and having them do presentations and show and Mike as well, the social justice things that are going on. This is what we're doing in our community. This is what we're doing in our schools. Don't you want to come work with us? And actually really active in the recruiting process. That was really appealing to me, especially since we've had not just difficulty finding qualified candidates of color, but certainly qualified candidates. The numbers have fallen. I can't say we're not finding them because we clearly are. It must be the good weather. But so anyway, I'll let you take, or maybe as a member of the committee, Rob, you might want to address that.
I'll let Michaela go.
Well, I just want, like I said, one more thing.
Yeah,
Sorry to interrupt. Is that, I didn't, for some reason, it didn't dawn on me because 9 years ago or whenever when I was on the committee, it didn't include social justice, but now it does, and that makes this, I mean, how you can separate those out, ever not think of them together is something unusual. So that's why I encourage Mike to come tonight as well.
Yeah. I would say one of the challenges with being in Vermont is not that people don't know Vermont exists, but they don't think about it. And so being present and being active is one way to get that idea into students' heads when they're young, when they're in college, because what do you remember? And to be honest, that's how I ended up in Vermont, is someone told me a story about an experience that they had, and I was like, oh, like, I want to, is that how it happens? And so, but before that, I wouldn't have thought of it. And so I came to visit, and I was like, oh, I like it. So I think that is one instance, and so it serves two purposes where we can talk about restorative justice, and we can talk about social justice in classroom, and also serves as a way to remind people that Vermont exists, and our kids get to visit colleges, which is really cool. In addition to that, what we also talked about is creating infrastructure in the schools, and that's what this money would do, is that we're not just gonna have trainers come in, because we've done that before, and what happens is that half the people are engaged and the other half are like rolling their eyes and like, when is this gonna be over? But the reality is that, and Lyle, actually, I think you've talked to the school leaders about this already, is that designating school leaders for social justice and diversity in each school, which will be part of the infrastructure to support the work before everyone gets trained, and having those people go get trained, and having those people there to support the teachers, almost like your instructional coach, in their efforts to do this work, and also having the backup of me and the new person to do that, and Mike in terms of restorative justice, which is very much about social justice and equity in the schools. So this is about really, hopefully, you know, like I said before, is that following the money and showing what our priorities are, by really making an investment in this way for our families. I mean, I had a kid come to me today, and he was just like, he looked at me, and someone sent around research, sent me an article that was about how kids of color need to see teachers that look like them. And he just looked at me, and I didn't prompt him. He said, I haven't had one teacher of color since I've been here. And I was like, okay. I'm like, will you go to Spanish class? And he's like, he was like, I'm done. There are 2 weeks left of school, and I'm trying to like talk him into like passing his classes, like, and he's like, I'm not trying to use that as an excuse, he said to me, but he's like, I just, like when I walk the halls, he's like, he's like, right now I just can't. And I'm like, oh, like what? You know, so this is really, it's pressing. And one thing that I say is like, we have to act like the house is on fire, because kids are slipping through the cracks. And so this is not just about optics, it's really about our students. And it just becomes harder and harder for them as they get older. I mean, I spent like an hour talking to a middle school team about microaggressions and what that means. I went to a conference against racism in Vermont schools where kids don't even know that they're experiencing racism. And that is one of our challenges. It's that it's been invisibilized, and that is just as dangerous. So we have 2 kids saying like, I've never experienced racism ever. And so I nudged one of my students and I said, tell a pencil story. And I had a student come to me saying that kids were putting pencils in her hair and like asking her. And she was like, well, I didn't think anything was wrong with it. And so she told this story. And I had to tell her, I was like, what? And they're putting them in her hair because they won't fall out. and that is about race. But she didn't think about it. But imagine the pain of that experience and people thinking, and she herself thinking nothing's wrong with it, and no one seeing it. So like, how do we make it so that our teachers are able to see that and say, oh no, like, get your hands out of her hair. That's not okay. And let's talk about why that's not okay. And we may be curious about things, but where are the boundaries? What are the boundaries we need to have? And when are we crossing that line? And I think that some of it is that, and we realize, and like when we're doing these interviews, right? It's like some people just don't know. So that's part of it too. So, I mean, I think that, and I'll let Mike talk, but like the house is on fire. Like this is really pressing, and putting resources towards it would be amazing. And it's not just a resource for any individual student, it's for all the kids. And it impacts all kids, even though I'm particularly talking about kids of color right now.
Well, I think what you just said, Michaela, speaks to the need to educate all students about that, because I'm sure that in that story that you just told, that the kids putting the pencils also didn't realize that that was not okay. And so having a more deeper understanding of how to help kids navigate this is something that's going to help all the students know, how to treat one another. It's not just about supporting and protecting students of color, but also about what resources and kind of understanding and knowledge are we providing for all of the students. Sorry, go ahead.
Excuse me, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't
Oh,
mean
no,
to cut you
go
off.
ahead.
I just wanted to say it, not only is it important for kids of color to have role models, people who are of color, but it's equally as important for people who are kids who aren't of color to see people in color in leadership and teaching roles and administrator roles and so on. That is, if we really want to talk about addressing white supremacy kind of thinking, that is really critical, that we have more people of color in all the roles, in counseling, in administration, and in teaching roles. And I see that in the restorative work I do. You can, after a while, you start seeing that kind of problem that exists in our schools, and it's not only within the kids, but it's us. I mean, we are part of a system, and the systemic racism that exists in our systems is, I know the other day, I can't think exactly what it was, but Michaela picked me up on something that I just didn't think of, and I think I'm a pretty aware person, and I just didn't think about the systemic part of that. So I think, to me, this is like, it's so critical for our kids' future in this world that we address this, not passively, but really with some real intent of doing something. So.
And I would say that it's courageous, it's a risk, but it gives us the possibility of also retaining people from marginalized groups, and that is part of the plan, is like, how do we create just infrastructure, like I drive almost an hour to get my hair cut. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like stuff like that people don't think of. That's just a reality for some of us here. Like, people are texting me like, "Ooh, where do you?" And so, like, thinking about those things and how we support our family, because typically it's one of our families that braids hair or does things. Those are our kids, and creating those connections amongst the community that we have here is important. And it just isn't done very often. And luckily we have this halftime person, which I hope will help, because it's like, it's hard. Like we've had dinners where we get all the families together, but it's hard to do because it's not, I'm only one person, but also because some people are scared to talk about race. They're like, well, how do I tell kids, families of color, that they can come to this thing? And how, and it's like, that is important. We shouldn't be scared to have events for families with children of color. we shouldn't be nervous about talking about that. That I feel like that also tells us about the state of our schools. If we can't even say that, like now is a time in history when we can say that. Like this is for these families, and there's a reason. And like I'm sure there are other families that need to have those kind of affinity groupings as well, not just those.
So, well, a couple of things. One is the reason that this, one of the reasons that this added impact that this seems at this time really added impact is the recent meta research that was done mostly with middle school kids, but it was found at every level where students don't have role models that they recognize, that to show them what they can be, they believe the things that they hear about who they are, and they become that. And it's yet another example that it really is hard. It brought the word harm into the process for me, rather than it's not right or it's not fair or it would be better, but it's actually harmful to the kids. When you say the house is on fire, I see it that way. I also think that for Brattleboro, these issues aren't specific to Brattleboro, but they're way more pressing in our schools, I think, than in many of the other schools in the district. So,
I mean, I would bet that, there's more students that are affected by that study that you just mentioned, but the impact that has on the kids in the outline counts who are even more of a minority at their school would probably be just as dire, if not more so, because they don't even have that many peers that they can, feel they share that with. But just so we're clear on what it is that we're talking about here, it would be a recommendation of our board to the merged board that they allocate $100,000 for supporting the two positions at the SU level in doing this recruiting, curriculum support, and teacher coaching and teacher leader work.
well, Michaela had requested $350,000 over 5 years, so was it 70,000 a year.
Yeah,
75.
Yeah, average, yeah. And then we'd also, from our conversation with Curtis Reed and the Vermont Partnership, we talked about those services, particularly in terms of the real professional finding of candidates, the work that they did, that he and Jen Jacobs did for the town, and the work that he did in Burlington, I think was about $35,000 for a year.
So that's where the other 25 came from,
Yeah.
as money specifically about recruiting, either hiring an outside contractor or.
And that might not be necessary, it might be necessary. And we don't know. I think that the fact that we have potential opportunity here to find out, to try a couple of things, or to try a number of things at once and see how it works. We can't tell them to put $70,000 a year aside, but we can point out that this is a sizable resource that we would like them to use for that. We could, in order to not have to wait a year, make a motion at the annual meeting to increase the budget by the 70 or 95 or 100 or whatever for next year. And someone will point out when you make that motion, we'd say because we want to support the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice.
So
and the question would be, you can't make us, you can't tell us what to do with it, but we could make it very clear that that's what we want it to be used for.
But don't we need to give that money to the SU?
Well,
because that's who Michaela and the other person are employed by.
Well, we would put it in, I think if we put it into the SD budget for that work, then it would go to into the SU budget, yeah.
Right. So I'm just asking about the details, I guess, of this recommendation.
There's a lot of questions.
Are we recommending that we increase our assessment or whatever it's called to the SU by this amount for the purpose of
I don't know how that.
supporting that office? Because it seems like that's who needs to legally own this money for it to be administrated by Michaela. Is that right?
Well, Michaela is, in that office is now part of the well, as of July 1, part of the SU. I was thinking of this as part of the SD. And we would, it would not make any sense, even though Michaela's an SU employee, to have anyone other than Michaela overseeing.
So you think that it could still work just as fine if it was the SD
I don't
budget?
see why not.
Okay.
Then could I, say that Vernon wanted a school bus to go to Boston or whatever, could I pay for that, or with that money still, if they're not an SD?
Well, you have other, I mean, you have other money
It's
that,
complicated, isn't it?
you have other money that we approved for your budget
Oh, so I
from the
use that
SU
money.
already.
So I
maybe
use the
you could
SU money
use
for
that
that.
money
Okay,
to pay
okay,
for
okay.
Vernon, and then the rest of it to pay for everybody else.
Okay, got it. That makes sense. Got it.
Because, yeah,
But it's a good
that's
idea.
the only percentage of it goes
After.
to.
Right.
Mike, are you an employee? I mean, is this some work that you do in addition to your work as a teacher? Because you're a teacher also at the high school, right?
Well, I run a restorative program.
Exactly.
And for both the high school and for BAMS.
Is that part of your job description?
Yeah,
or-
that's part of my job description. But also, Michaela and I have worked together on things, so my job description probably doesn't really reflect what I do, actually, very well.
I'm sure.
I'm like mine.
And so,
I'm completely in favor of what
right.
this proposal, the reason for it, the background for it, the research that supports it. I'm sitting here, much like the previous discussion, there's a lot of process stuff about a 5-year commitment. It's not something this Brattleboro Town School Board can make a 5-year commitment. So it's really trying to find our role in the diminishing weeks of the Brattleboro Town School Board to support this. And then we also spent some money and proposed supporting the initiative of the partnership, Curtis Reed and how does
That's
this?
out of this budget right now.
That's out of the current budget, so this is all moving forward. So
Yeah.
none of this
This
is
is
not an
all
overlap or.
July 1, no.
Okay. So,
I just want to, from my perspective, I want to stress how important I think it is that someone who's in the school system, knows the teachers, knows what's going on within the system. It's really important that Michaela is looked to as the primary resource, I think. Because I don't think you can come from the outside, you can still do things that benefit, but I don't think you can really make the real impact in the infrastructure that Michaela talks about without being a part of it, the system, if you will. That's where the changes have to be made. And it won't do us any good to hire people of color if they come in and they don't want to stay. We've accomplished nothing.
Actually, moving backwards.
And we've had some of that happen in the past, even since I've been here. So we need to make internal changes, and so you have to know the internal stuff to do it.
So could, this is, I mean, this would have to be worked out by others, obviously, but would you be looking for stipends for the school leaders, the teacher leaders?
That's something that we haven't talked about.
Yeah, we haven't.
That would be, yeah,
It wouldn't be, like math coach, would it?
really it would not be.
And you're not talking about a lot of, at least not initially, a lot of professional, you're not going to use up a bunch of professional development days. If you're talking about
For just
identifying
leaders.
people in the schools.
No.
Initially you
You
would.
mean the PD days that are already scheduled, that schools have already scheduled?
Or, yeah, like big activity.
Probably not. I would say
I'm thinking about
no.
the administration's concerns when we first brought this up, that, well, we've got all these things and we're scheduled a couple of years ahead of this.
No, I think that those large-scale PDs are only useful when we're already up and running. So I feel like the first step would be to maybe, and I don't know, we may be paying for subs for certain days for the teacher leaders to come together, to be together and do some training that way. That I would think small scale, not school-wide PD days. That would be, I would feel like that would be the start, because they would be the point people in the schools. Teachers are more likely to engage with their peers. As much as I know or Mike knows, like what he said also rings true. Like I'm a little bit from the, even though I'm inside, I'm from the outside. Like when I go to schools, I'm like, I work here too. They're like, oh, you do. And so being present is important, I think, in the schools, to get rid of that idea that I don't work there. But it's really important for them to have someone who they can ask, like, hey, I said this thing, should I have said it? Someone who's also close to them, someone who's in their building. Or, you know, hey, I want to teach this thing, can you help me figure this out? And then maybe they could come to me, but that person would be the primary resources. That would be the hope to build that up. And that would take some time.
I assume there'd be, you're talking about teams of teachers to go to conferences, those things are available, they're out there.
There's so many things. There are things that even in the summer, everyone loves Free People, Free Minds, which actually is going to be in Minnesota. I've heard nothing but good things about that, and they actually, you could take kids. So teachers could go and take a team of youth to that conference. There's a lot of conferences all over the place that are about social justice and about building up community in the way that we want to do here. Yes. For sure. That's the one that's coming up soon. It's in July, so I usually don't go, but everyone's like, you should go. So there are a lot of, and there's like NICOR in New York, which actually I do take high school kids to, and they usually do a presentation there. There's Boston area Teachers for Social Justice. They do a conference every year. So just like starting to do those things and then presenting at them, because I feel like that's one of the ways we learn.
Is I'll stop asking questions, let other people talk. But is the Randolph, the group that sponsored that, is that an ongoing, are there things coming down the road?
They said that was their first annual, so we'll see what happens.
And there's some networking and some connections?
Yeah, for sure. That, and as well as the equity summit that we did. So I worked on with Linda from VPA. I mean, I think that there's a lot of possibilities for networking that are coming up. I feel like there's a lot of happenings in terms of equity, because that's where all the philanthropic efforts are going right now. So everybody is leaning in. And so I feel like that also gives a possibility, depending on how we use our time, to ask for matching funds for certain things that we want to do, because people are really interested in equity right now.
And there's also the ethnic studies bill that was recently passed that is mandating that we have certain standards in our curriculum around that. So a lot of this would just be stuff that we're going to need to be doing anyway.
For sure.
And so it's good that we kind of get the jump on that and put money towards it before it's like the state's findings or whatever happens if you don't meet the requirements of the bill.
For sure, and I feel like the other interesting thing is that this is about social emotional, but it's also interdisciplinary, and it goes across all the subjects, and that is the barrier we need to broach right now, because people think of social justice and diversity as a social studies topic, but it really isn't. And so how are we integrating it across the curriculum that gets the kids questioning us, which is not always the best situation to be in, but that's where we want our kids to be, even if we don't have the answers.
Michaela, I've often thought at concerts at the high school, or even whenever there's a program, I bet oftentimes when the jazz band performs or the concert band or choir performs, many of the composers are people of color. And I've often thought how many people in the audience have no idea of the diversity of this creation. And it would be as simple as putting in bios and photographs. It's so easily done with our technology. So that the program is, I'm just bouncing off your idea, it's not just a social studies issue. It's in the arts, it's in any curriculum that you're doing. And there are practical ways that children can see, oh yeah, you know, I can relate to Charles Mingus. I can relate to Duke Ellington. and these are the people that created the music I'm playing in my band, or an audience member is just going, oh, boy, there's a lot of diversity going on here and creativity in our culture that they might not be aware of just
Right.
because they never had a full, music education. And they're just names on a program until you bring it live with more information.
Many layers.
So I'm guessing that we are not really in a position, correct me if I'm wrong, to move money in this direction as a board.
Oh, we could make a
We could make a
recommendation.
motion that the Brattleboro Town School Board supports the creation of a fund to accomplish to support the initiatives that you've outlined very thoroughly here in this document. But I'm not sure, unless someone's going to correct me, that we're not in a position here to designate $70,000 or make a multi-year commitment. But we could make a motion to support moving forward with the new structure, the new Wyndham Southeast School District. And I would mention both the school district and working into conjunction with the supervisory union to work money into the next budgeting process to start building this fund and this initiative. Do I need to?
Do you, well, we haven't got the wording there. Do you want to would you suggest including that we'd like to see our surplus used in that? That's what we're specifically recommending, is that they use that over.
Well, I wasn't going to go there because I felt like we had just backed away from that in the last conversation.
Well, because these.
I didn't want to wake up that
Well, I think
issue again.
the main reason we backed away from it is that it's in the capital plan has most of those things in it already, so they're gonna happen. This won't happen. I think, well, it depends on how strongly we feel about it. I mean, do we wanna say that, we have this revenue, this surplus revenue, and we have these needs in our schools, we have them in all of our schools, it's particularly, it's greater in the groundwork schools. And we would like to be, we would recommend or encourage, or we'd like to be assured that most of this money, or at least 70,000 of this a year, will be used as revenue into the budget to support the work of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice, or the programs, or however you want to say it. And that would say.
I have no problem with that.
Yeah, and that would say, so when you start the next budget process, take some of that money and put it in.
I don't know if this would be two different motions, but I think that what we should do is if we want to try getting this in for the current year, as you suggested, making a floor motion at the meeting, and
That's
we
that would
can
be
make a motion now that says we, as a board, agree
this.
to make this motion or whatever, that we allocate $100,000 towards the upcoming school year budget for this work, but then we would hope for an at least 5-year commitment towards this at the SU level. So I think since we're doing this at the last minute, we can only ask for something from the school district that we're a part of, which is today this, and at the meeting, we're talking about the WSESD. But going on to the subsequent school years, this should really be something that's in the SU budget, and that's what I would ask for people to support going forward on that SD board.
So that we would move to increase the budget by 100,000 this year on June 25th. And going forward that the SU support at that level, or
And,
go on.
and we could say we want to assign money from the general fund balance of Brattleboro Town School Board for this $100,000. Right? We could put that in the motion on the floor.
Well, we couldn't
Because it's
assign
gonna-
it.
it's
We
about to
couldn't
be
assign
voted
it.
on
We
by
say,
people,
yeah,
right?
we would like to increase it.
How is that going to affect the tax rate
It's gonna go
though?
up.
You've got to,
Yeah.
even it's, so, that's going to be major issue for people.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's something that we're offering for people to talk about and vote on at the meeting. We're not
Right.
doing it.
No,
We're
I
just
know,
saying,
but
discuss, and
Yeah.
if you want to vote.
Yeah, that's because and so signing wouldn't work. Yeah, it's clear that it would be an increase in the budget. And people would have to vote to support it. That would put it in, the money would be available July 1st. It would be available this year if we did it that way.
I guess
The
if we
second part
want,
is, what do we say about the out years?
Yeah.
How do we want to phrase
but
it?
I mean, I'm just wondering, would it be possible? Because you know how, like, we put money in our budget when we made it from that general fund to ameliorate the tax rate. Could we, at that meeting, say, and we want to add $100,000 of our general fund to this budget to erase the tax impact of that?
I mean, have the motion from the floor be to move $100,000 from the reserve funds collectively in that budget into the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice.
Yeah, or I don't know, from town meeting, I feel like what they would probably say you have to do is just assign that money with the recommendation that the board spend it on this.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah,
really,
actually.
maybe the motion should be
Yeah.
to allocate $100,000 of the general fund into the budget with the intention of spending it on the Office of Social.
But it would be to increase the budget, would be the motion. To add $100,000 to that amount,
Yeah,
because what we voted on at the meeting is that amount, what, that 50 million?
So we can't make a motion at the meeting to assign general fund money into it.
Because the
That's a-
surplus is already automatically rolling in as income for the coming year. It's not staying in a separate account.
Well,
It isn't?
it goes into the bank, it doesn't become revenue. It just it stays where it is. But
Yeah, it doesn't,
just-
it's not
it comes
included,
under the
this, it's
SB.
not included in the budget,
Right.
it's staying by itself. And we,
Yeah.
only the amount that we said, put this money in so that it doesn't impact the tax rate.
Yeah, I think
So
that's-
I'm just wondering, is that able to be done at the meeting or not?
No, I don't think so.
You can't assign more
Yeah.
general fund money at the meeting.
Mhm.
we
So like our
can't
previous-
designate money to be moved anywhere.
Like our previous conversation, Amy, you were referring to,
This is what
the town has already adopted or voted on supporting a new position, correct?
All the towns,
Yes.
yes.
And that's really powerful for towns to vote and support that. If this plan, to me, it seems like if this plan is a really solid plan that would affect, benefit children moving forward, if once again, next year during the budget season, it's developed into the budget, pitched, shared with the community, and then the community were to vote for it, like that would be very powerful. And that's kind of, that's how it should work, right?
One thing though is that the votes that we made on that budget, that as a town of Brattleboro, the town reps voting on the budget that we made, is now a mere recommendation because of the fact that
But
that
we
school
went-
district doesn't
but we
exist.
went through
So
it.
that's why we're having this other meeting, that people get to vote again on the same budgets that we already approved. Our town already approved it, but now that doesn't work anymore. We have to get it approved by this larger body of all the towns. So
But
it's doing
each-
the same approvals for the same budget, we gotta reapprove it.
Correct. But each town did go through a lengthy process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And this is like kind of coming in the last week.
Yep.
I think it'd be more powerful if we came in through a lengthy process that the town could vote on. Or that-
And we would simply make a recommendation. We're back to why Mr. George Carville got up at the meeting at Oak Grove School when we first started hashing this out and saying that we should just let our surplus roll forward and we should play by the rules, but we can make a statement saying that we support the creation of this fund, which is a new project. We haven't had a fund of this amount of resources. We've sort of been doing it on the fly, piecemeal. And what you're saying is we should be planning. It's the same thing that Curtis Reed has said. The only way you affect change is by making a 10-year commitment. You don't do it just to check the box, as Curtis would like to say.
I wouldn't
His office
say it's been without a plan though, or piecemeal. I think it has been with a plan but a very small amount of money.
Yeah, but it's never been a, something called a fund and that's, has a annual budget and long-term, it's got long-term goals, but it hasn't had the,
It hasn't had enough money to.
it hasn't had enough money.
Make those goals
But
happen.
the point is that we're back to where we were about energy retrofits on Oak Grove School in many ways. I think that what we can do is make a motion to support this moving forward with the new board and with the SU and with the new, and I'm finding myself agreeing with Mark on this, that it needs to go through the budget process. It's going to, rather than try to do it here at the 11th hour.
Well,
I think,
the other thing is, and I know that there's a lot of feelings about 11th hour processes and democracy. But the other reality is that this is a good time for influx of resources. I mean, we'll have some. I'll have some anyway because there's a new halftime person. But the more, the better. And let's see what happens, I would say. Like, I feel like the timing is really matters. And so like waiting a whole another year, I mean, that's fine. I mean, to be honest, I found out about this in the paper and I was like, oh, let me think about, I was like, let me show up. So, I mean, I think that there is also this semblance that when you go to town meeting and you do things the right way, that's equitable, and that's just not true. Because who is going to go to town meeting? Who shows up to town meeting? Are all of our families at town meeting? Like, who is there? Who talks? So if you're talking about equity and bringing it to town meeting, the people that I'm talking about, this supporting, are not the people there. They're not the people standing up, going on and on with their clipboard and their notes. Those are not the same, those are not the people. And so that's fine. I have no problems because I've been waiting a long time. I've been waiting, like we've been waiting. I have no problem waiting, but just to say that is the semblance of democracy. That's the semblance of equity, when in reality, our marginalized families are not at town meeting.
I think when Mark described the process and it being stronger, it's a stronger message in some ways, but I think in terms of effect, particularly on students, it's, we miss a year opportunity. One of the things I talked with Robert about this week, or last week, is how it was 3 years ago that she first came and said, we need to start. I think it was 3. We need to, we need to really look at this. We need to start taking steps. And we, there have been efforts and conversations have happened. We've had a training, and people are obviously aware of it, but we haven't really done anything of real impact. And this is.
Well, we hired a new position.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, absolutely. And that was broad, and that's definitely going to help. But if you think about the urgency, if you think about the values that this community expresses, the kinds of things that people are asking for, the kinds of things that people are interested in, the efforts that are going into trying to diversify the workforce, and the opportunity that this presents, to me it's a question of, we have an opportunity to do this. We would take it to town meeting, which is the official democratic way to do it. We would make a motion from the floor to add to the rate, to add to the budget bottom line with the expectation or the hope that, and clear expectation that it would be used to support the work of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice. And we would start in July instead of next July.
Do you mean town meeting or the general meeting coming up?
The annual
meeting, not town.
The December 25th, meeting, or June 25th. So we would be able to get these resources in place. There's no question, I think, that if we went through the regular budget process, we would, and people would come and talk about it, and the resources we put there, and I think that's what will happen going forward. But I think that the fact that we have this money, and we can make this recommendation, and although it will affect the tax rate, it's going to, those resources will be in there to moderate the effect going forward. I think but I would like to I would support putting it in front of voters and letting them decide whether they want to start this year and raise their tax rate or not.
But we can't say for sure that money is going to go for what we want it to go for.
Clearly.
So
That's true whether we make a floor motion or
Yeah,
not.
and I think it's also true, though, that if the community votes in favor of this after a long conversation about what people want it to be spent on, it'd be very unlikely the board would do exactly that.
I understand that, but there's no guarantee that this money,
Yeah, sure.
where that money is gonna go for.
Yeah, absolutely.
So are you suggesting we not make a motion tonight, but we prepare to make a motion from the floor at the general meeting?
When I had a minute, I can figure it out myself.
We have one more Brattleboro Town School Board meeting before the general meeting. We have one more of these meetings before the general meeting.
Yeah. I'm not sure, well, then, in that case, we don't have to decide tonight. I'm not sure that there's value to waiting 2 weeks. You know,
Can you form a proposal?
A proposed motion, you mean?
Yes. Can you word a motion?
I move that the Brattleboro Town School Board agree to move to increase the WSESD budget by $100,000 for FY 2020, with the intention that it be spent, that the money be used by the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice to
Fulfill this purpose.
fulfill the goal of expanding or creating equity in the school district. I don't have those words quite right, but yeah.
We're not moving to increase the budget. We're making a motion to support doing that, recommending doing that. Because we don't really have the authority to
There's two
increase their
things that we're
budget.
talking about here. One is, what is somebody going to say at the annual meeting? But there's also a motion that David was trying to make, that our board vote in favor of somebody making that motion.
Yeah.
So
But
I
it's
think
a motion of support.
that was the thing that he just said was, I move that we all agree to support this thing that I'm going to do on the day.
And I think because we've been talking about it for so many years, I think that carries I think that the board is going to agree with this. I don't think there's going to be much resistance to increasing the supporting program. But I think that if we're saying this is something that we've been working on, we see this as an opportunity because there is this surplus fund that's going in, and that there will be resources available for the next several years, so we don't want to wait. And we'd like to start this year with this, in the course of the conversation. But the motion would be moved to increase the budget by $100,000 with the expectation that it would be used to support the office.
The motion at the general meeting.
Yeah,
But
and
the
then
motion
the
now is
conversation-
to support doing such.
The motion is for us to make that motion.
Yeah. I mean, so
Do we have to
what you're
do that?
asking is, I think what David is asking is that he wants the floor motion to be, the Brattleboro Town School Board moves that blah, 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 blah. So that's why he's trying to say, could we vote on this? But do we have to? No, we could just be like, I, David, make the motion, or any one person, doesn't even have to be someone on the board. It could be a townsperson, or it could be, Michaela, or anyone who lives in any of the 4 towns. So we don't have to do it at all. But that's why he's asking for it, so that it sounds like it has the backing of our whole board, this idea.
And I'd also like to be able to say at the district meeting tomorrow night that we had this conversation and we're going to be making that motion for the floor. So people, it's not a surprise. I would like it to be just, out there and people thinking about it, talking about it, and having time to consider all the different aspects of it.
So could you say that motion so that we could get it into the minutes? And then ask for a second and move on it, because I think
I move that the Brattleboro Town School District agree to move to increase the WSESD budget by $100,000 with the expectation that that money would be designated for the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice, for the work of the in the.
Can you put at the annual meeting?
Yeah, well, it's to increase the WSES budget on June 25th. Expecting the funds would support the work of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice in our schools.
The annual meeting of the new board is an annual meeting of the citizens of these 5 towns, but it's not a meeting of existing boards.
It's like
So-
town meeting, but for 4 towns.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that I would feel more supportive of this motion if it said that we are supporting a motion made to do this at the general meeting. Because we're not really an entity at that general meeting.
That the town school district
It's not-
supports.
We're not the actor as a board at that general meeting, to my understanding. I'm a
That's true,
novice
yeah,
of this.
good point.
But we're not an entity. The entities are the individual voters of these 4 towns. So I would support a motion here that would say that we support any motion made at the general meeting to increase the budget by $100,000 to create a
Funds to
a
support.
fund
Well,
to support the
we're not
work of this.
creating a fund. We are
Right,
just
we're-
allocating money to this office.
Yeah, the funds be used to
But-
support.
We are
the office.
hoping,
But it's
we can't
toward.
say that they're being allocated.
Right,
Yeah.
We are wanting and wishing,
Yeah.
but it's not being allocated by us.
With the
We're
recommendation
recommending that it be,
that the budget be
Used for
increased
that
by
purpose.
that amount of money. And that
Okay,
we
so let me
recommend it be
see.
used to.
Let me see if it's here. I move the Brattleboro Town School District supports an increase in the Wyndham Southeast Supervisory District budget on June to increase the budget on June 25th by $100,000, recommending these funds be used to support the WSCSU Office of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice in our schools.
I would second that. That's a articulated motion.
Chelsea, will you read it back, please? when we're done?
Yeah. I've written, David moved that the Brattleboro Town School District agree to increase the WSESD budget by $100,000 with the expectation that the money would be designated for the work of the WSESU Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice Office.
No further discussion?
I'd really like to, and obviously, it's $100,000 on $51 million budget, but I need to know the tax impacts before I agree to, say yes to doing that. I agree with Mark, things are supposed to go through a budget process. And yes, we have the surplus, but things are supposed to go, we require everything else to go through budget process.
Kim, the question I wanted to ask earlier, by increasing the staffing at the equity office from 1 full-time to 1.5 full-time,
Yes.
what increase, we are moving in this direction, even in the current budget. What is the dollar amount that we've increased the budget for, roughly? I'm not asking for dollars and cents. Just-
Maybe 65,000?
And my other question was, this proposal that Michaela has brought tonight articulates that the money is not just to be used for salary, it's for programs. What is the current program budget roughly for the Equity Diversity Committee?
it was
It
double
just
the current budget.
got raised, so like basically I spend right now, my budget is $6,000 at VUHS number 6,
Mhm.
and I spend all that money. And so the idea is that there will be another $6,000 to cover all the other schools, so it's 12.
$12,000.
So the current budget is
Right.
12,000, so that's what we'd be
Okay.
increasing the budget, not the
So I
salary
only- yeah.
piece.
So I only brought that up because about this process thing. We've had a budget, it's been pretty level for a while, we're just moving up. We're not standing still. And what we're asking for moving forward is just a recommendation. It can be voted down, we're not making the decision. And I totally agree with you, Kim, that meeting, taxes are going to be on the agenda of the people that come to that meeting. And
I just want to ask a sort of politics question, so I hope this is okay to talk about openly. But I'm just wondering, I would hope that at this meeting, people show up and be like, yes, this sounds awesome, let's do it right now. But I'm just wondering, for you guys who have been on these boards a longer time, and Lyle, what do you think would be the impact if people did not vote in support of this motion? Do you think that it would be difficult to get it put into the SU budget on the following year because people voted it down? Or do you feel like the board would still be like, okay, well, we'll just do it the following year?
And that's my argument, by the way. That's my fear. You do something at the 11th hour and people don't see it as a thoughtful process. Gets voted down, then where are you?
I mean, to be fair, this entire thing is 11th hour. We didn't even have a meeting until April 2nd for the board approving these budgets for starting on July 1st. So it's a lot of the 11th hourness is what was imposed on us. And we didn't really have a lot of other options to do it in a more long-term way for this. Now, we could have proposed this last fall.
Sure.
Yes, that's true. But we, at that time, you know, we hadn't even added this position yet at the SU level, and our board didn't really have any employee or office for this at all. So that's why it wasn't in then. Now, going forward, we have sort of the infrastructure that is officially governing our schools. You know, when we were developing these budgets still, Michaela was an employee of the high school, as she currently is. And so we couldn't really be like, Town is going to give $100,000 to the high school's budget and hope that they spend it on us. I mean, that would have just been like subverting the whole method.
But throughout the process, the plan was to add a position so that other schools could benefit from the work. And that went through a process that was communicated with community members.
But that process wasn't really lengthy.
Rather
It just
not
happened early in
we
the
not have
season.
dialogue, so, you know, hear some more voices. I think that, you know, the points have been pretty clearly made. I don't share that fear. I think that when people are aware that this is happening, I think there'll be a major turnout, and I think it'll be overwhelmingly supported. I know that, the sense of this community, at least at the organized level of the town and the school districts, is very much in support of this. And programs that are happening in every direction and every corner of the community to support these kinds of efforts to repair the damage from the lack of equity. And so I'm not at all fearful of what's going to happen. I think that what I'm asking, what that motion I hope is asking for, is for us to say that we want the town to vote, to decide this because we think it's really important. We see this as an opportunity with this change that we wouldn't be considering this if we weren't being pushed to do all these things really quickly. But we want this, we think this is really important, and we see this as an opportunity to make a really significant investment and a really significant step forward in a very important area. I promise to say it. To me, it's crucial. And it's something that's been not done well for hundreds of years. So I think that what I'm asking for is that we don't know what the nuts and bolts are going to be or how people are going to decide what's going to happen for sure. But I would like us to say that it's really important for this to go forward. And we'd like it to go forward on July 1st instead of waiting a year. And it's because we have this opportunity right now.
I think
It
your
really
motion,
is a different time.
I think your motion gives us an opportunity to make that statement.
Do you feel able to do that calculation on what would be the tax impact of it?
Very ballparky, it'd probably be, might be 0.3 cents, but I could be way off too. A penny in Brattleboro raises $116,000. So and that's on our grant list, everybody else's grant lists are different. But that budget is about 3 times that, so I don't know if those numbers work or not. And it would be different every time as well.
Did anyone second that one?
I did.
Further discussion?
I mean, and I think it's overdue, and yes, I completely think we need to have this in the budget, but I think it needs to go through the regular plan. And my concern is, what else are people gonna be throwing out? You know, if somebody from Oak Grove, are they coming and, you know, a parent saying, I wanna add $100,000, you know, for this and that. We have, you know, a whole bunch of people that could come in and say, we need this in this town, we need to add $50,000. You know, things that don't go through the budget process. And then, you know, everybody says yes, but then when the big budget comes up and everybody sees what everything's been added up to, and now we're up to however much money, then it gets defeated, then what happens? If the overall budget gets defeated.
I think, Kim, where we've moved is the earlier discussion, previous weeks, previous meetings, and this meeting was to try to find a way to, you know, actually designate money for specific projects. And we pulled back from that. This motion is, in my mind, is a recommendation. It can be voted up or down by the citizenry, but it's a statement by this board of an important priority that's been articulated because we advertised to the community to come and express priorities. We've now made it, I think that I'm feeling the general consensus is that the energy projects are touched sufficiently in the capital budget. The playgrounds, we think for equity between, and it's not just going to be starting July 1st, what's needed at Green Street and Academy and Oak Grove, it's going to be Putney and Dummerston. So we backed off on that because we want the process. But this is, it is a new initiative, and we're throwing it out to the community, and as a board, we're simply making a recommendation. We're not trying to actually call for the funds. We're saying, give the community an opportunity to weigh in on this topic because of the importance of it. We're not actually, we know, we're all well enough informed to know that we can't designate the funds, but we could make a recommendation to the new board and to the community, and if it went down, it would still be a strong statement, and I think I saw Lyle saying that she didn't feel from past practice that it would reverse, it would be an impediment to moving forward on the issue, even if the town decided, the community, not the town. We need some new language here. The region decided that this wasn't a priority and that the tax rate was more important. So I don't know if it's possible on a board to move a question, but unless there's someone.
Well, you can't after you spoke.
I can't anyway, but I don't even know if it's possible for anyone else to. I'm feeling like we've discussed this sufficiently. That's my own personal opinion.
Further discussion.
You're about to vote after this?
Yep. Well, if nobody else has anything to say.
I would just say one thing, and I think that this is often a challenge, and I understand process, but historically, process and focusing on process has not gotten people good places, especially when it comes to justice. And so this is a historical moment, and I feel like and it might not seem like it, and it's also a statement. And so in that way, I think that it doesn't matter if it's voted down. Like, to stand up and say, for y'all to stand up and say, like, this is important to us, this is important to our children, and to say it out loud, which is the same thing that I did at that other meeting. Like, it doesn't matter to me whether or not you think I'm crazy, but I have to say it out loud, like, this is important, and I have to say why it's important. And that statement alone is invaluable. It's the same thing, like, you know, if you read a letter from Birmingham jail, wait, be quiet, do it the right way, do it quietly, and we'll help you. And we know that's not true. Power concedes nothing without a demand. And so there are a bunch of prickly people worried about the tax rate, but they're not the same people that are impacted the same way. They're just not. They're not. Like, I don't know anyone that I know that owns a home that's super prickly about, like, what the school's doing. There's a group of people And who are we worried about? Are we worried about our kids or that group of people who's super prickly about the tax rate? And it doesn't matter if they win. That's a different issue. But what matters here is like what kind of statement are we making? I think, but and I shouldn't say we because I'm not on board. But
Unfortunately, the catch-22 is we have to care about both sides.
well, they're not
We
sides.
have to, well, no, the prickly taxpayer and the student, we have to, as school board members, it's our responsibility to care for both.
I mean, I think it is to just name the prickly people. A lot of it is people who paid off their house already and they are really struggling to get by, even with just paying the property tax. It's not like people, it's not all just people that are like, I don't believe in taxes. I mean, this is like a real quality of life issue for many people. But that's why.
It's quality of life for everybody in terms of even, especially the students of color. I completely agree with, it's quality of life for everybody.
Right. I just meant, I don't want to sound as if I'm not caring about the tax rate. But I do think that's why this is a moment of some power for our board, because we are bringing so much money into this merged district. So if they want to ameliorate the tax rate for the following year for everybody, that's all our money that they're going to have to possibly do that with. So that's why I don't see this as just an oppressive measure tax-wise, because even if we're not able on that day to say, we threw $300,000 in for that already, and that's getting shared out to the people from the other towns, So there's such a, even though legally it seems we aren't able to say, take a little bit of our leftover general fund money and spend it on this, that's sort of the intention behind what we're doing.
This is only a recommendation on it, and it's giving an indication of priority. I mean, that's all it is. It's not an action. It's just a recommendation.
Well, the thing that's a controversial move is that we are asking the merged board to increase their school budget bottom line, which would have an impact on each taxpayer.
But as a recommendation, that's the way it's worded, right?
The membership, the annual meeting would make the vote.
Right,
They will make
yes.
the decision.
So it's still not an action, it's a
It's not.
recommendation.
We're recommending to make a motion that people could vote yes or no on.
We'll support.
Yeah, to support a motion.
Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion that Kelsey will read to us, so we're certain.
Haven't changed anything. David moved that the Brattleboro Town School District agreed to increase the WSESD budget by $100,000 with the expectation that the money would be designated for the work of the WSESU Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice Office. Andy seconded, and then I listed some of the conversation that ensued.
Can I just make one edit to that? It should say, David made a motion that the board support
Yes.
a motion at the annual meeting to.
Supports an
and then
increase in
all the-
budget.
Yeah. So we can't increase the budget.
Exactly.
We can only
Supports.
support a floor motion at the annual meeting to increase the budget.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? One abstention. Thank you. Any other business to come before the board at this meeting? Not on the agenda, but is there anything else, other business that we should be moving for the executive session? Entertain a motion to go home.
I move that we adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.